Hello everyone. This is Yana Smakula for SimonsSaysStamp.com. Welcome back for another Yippee For Yana video. In this episode, I will show you how to make a flip-up interactive masculine birthday card featuring simple stamping and partial die-cutting techniques. Here I have a new stencil from Simon Says Stamp called Confetti, and it's a fabulous one to create some cool confetti-like backgrounds for birthday and party cards. You probably think that this stencil doesn't look like much at a first glance, but often it's the simplest things that pack the most punch, and so is this stencil. I'm going to do some simple ink blending using ink blending tools in several colors of ink from Simon. First up is duckling ink, and I'm applying it all over the background. Here's what the first layer looks like. It's pretty one-color confetti. I want to go back and intensify this color, so I've realigned the stencil and I'm going to add more ink, but this time with a heavier hand to have a more vibrant yellow on my card. I'm going to clean my stencil, and for this I'm using a microfiber cloth and Hero Art's Ultra Clean Cleaning Solution. It's a perfect solution for removing this dye ink. Just giving it a quick wipe, and I'm ready to use my stencil again. It's important to clean your stencil in between the colors, especially if the colors are significantly different, to avoid having unexpected mistakes in your background. Now, to avoid having the exact same pattern on my paper, I'm going to flip my stencil to the other side and rotate it 90 degrees. Now, when I blend the next ink color, this is mint by the way, I'm going to add more confetti pieces, but they will be different and randomly placed in comparison to my first layer. So you can flip and turn your stencil for every layer to get different confetti placement. Next up, I'm using mallet blue ink. I've turned the stencil again before applying this ink. And finally, I'm turning it one last time to blend adhere blue ink. If you want, you can turn it and flip it up to 8 times to have different ink blending for each layer. Imagine using all sorts of different colors for your confetti background, and maybe also using texture or glitter pastes and even embossing powders. Next, I'm going to stamp a big sentiment from the birthday greetings stamp set in the center of my ink blended background. I love these block style sentiments. They are perfect to take center stage on a card. I'm first stamping it in adhere blue ink. Here, I'm using my Mini Misty stamping tool to double stamp this image to have a perfect ink transfer. Next, I'm going to shift the panel up and to the left just a fraction of an inch. You can't even see that I moved it, but I have. And next, I'm going to ink it up, but with black ink this time. I think you'll agree that the blue stamping is very faint and it's not clearly visible on my card. That's because I only wanted the blue stamping to work as a shadow on the sentiment and not be the main sentiment itself. After stamping the sentiment in black ink, it now looks a lot more prominent on the card, and it also has this awesome shadow to it. Now, when I was ink blending, I actually blended ink past the stencil boundaries onto my background, but I'm going to trim the panel down a little bit, so I'm not worried about that at all. Next, I want to cut the sentiment and create a flap in my panel so I can flip it up and reveal a secondary image and sentiment behind it on my card front. I'm using a rectangle die from Spellbinders, but any die will do for this. You just need to find something that's big enough to frame the sentiment block. Next, we need to do some partial die cutting, and it's super easy. I have my deep sea die cutting machine all set up. You need to place the panel on the cutting plate and cover it up with a second cutting plate only partially. You can see the top cutting plate only covers my panel up to the top cutting edge of the die. This way, when I make the cut, it would not have been made all the way through. Time to cut it. And here we go. The partial cut has been made, and we now have a flap on the front panel. Using a scoring tool and a scoring board, I'm making a score line in place of where that cut line should have been. This will allow me to open and close the panel easily. I've also trimmed the panel to 4 by 5¼ inches, and I'm going to use a foam adhesive tape to adhere it to an A2 light blue card base. I only added adhesive to the sides of the panel, not to the flap itself, as I need to be able to open and close it. Next, I place the card base, the blue card base, back into my MISTI. I place the top panel over it and align some additional stamps that I plan to stamp on the inside. I have a cake and a sentiment that reads, "Time to eat cake." I'm going to stamp those in black ink, and these are going to be my secondary messages on the hidden panel on my card. I decided to use a white pen to color the cake, and here I have Sakura Jelly Roll pen, number 0.8, and coloring the cake layers as well as the part of the candle. Time to assemble. All we need to do is to adhere the top panel over the card base, making sure it is centered on the card. And voila, the panel opens and closes freely. Now, to make a stopper for the panel so that it doesn't flip up all the time, I've die cut a little heart from blue cardstock. It's the same color cardstock I used for the background. It's actually Audrey blue cardstock from Simon. And I also die cut another identical heart from Fun Foam. I'm going to adhere the two together and then partially adhere the heart to the panel. Just the bottom part of the heart so that the top part of the heart can act as a stopper for this panel. I also made a little cardstock handle to be able to open the flap and reveal the message inside. I hope you'll give this idea a try using these or any other stamps and dies you have in your stash. On the screen, there's a link to another video featuring partial die cutting and a similar technique. Be sure to watch that one. Thanks! I'll see you next week!